Logan the Layman Critic here, back to review The Batman. Directed by Matt Reeves, it stars Robert Pattinson, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright, and Zoe Kravitz. Spoilers are ahead, so be warned. Let's talk movies. Various public figures in Gotham City are being murdered. The perpetrator is known as the Riddler, and he's been leaving behind clues for the Batman to figure out. With the help of Detective Gordon and a cat burglar named Selina Kyle, the Dark Knight sets out to uncover the Riddler's plot before he can drive the city into total ruin. Okay, so like a lot of people, I'm kind of burned out on the superhero film. We get a slew of them every year, and it's not even that they're bad. I would say that I enjoy the vast majority of them. But I think we've reached the point of oversaturation. It's become homogenized as a genre. So that necessitates that a movie has something to make it stand out and worth going to see. Now, I don't think many would debate that, historically speaking, the Batman films have always been something of an event, much like Star Wars. And like Star Wars, Batman has been spread very thin, with so many film appearances in a short span before finally being put on hiatus after 2017's Justice League. Now, after numerous changes in cast and crew and creative decisions, we have something worth calling an event film. Let's start with the visuals. The movie looks great, makes excellent use of light and shadow. The locations and sets have a mixture of urban and gothic, and there's lots and lots and lots of rain. There's definitely an attempt to make this film a neo-noir. Now, not being an expert on that genre, I'll defer to more learned minds on whether it fits the bill. That being said, I think a big part of what makes this movie distinctive is its visual style, and it has plenty of it to spare. Batman's costume is an intriguing design. It's high-tech on one end, but it's also rough around the edges. It's not elegant, which seems to be more in keeping with the story being set in the early part of Batman's career. The cape lacks the characteristic scallops. His boots look like the kind you might find in an army surplus store. He's got wrist gauntlets with a taser implemented. The costume definitely skews on the side of urban vigilante, but keeps enough of the bat aesthetic that it doesn't take you out of it. There was one touch that I particularly liked, where his bat emblem doubled as a removable gadget. Sidebar. I did not care for Catwoman's mask. I realize that this movie is going for a more grounded feel, but it's just a ski mask with the bottom part cut off. I mean, they could have done better. It's pointless and it looks dumb. The casting is solid. Robert Pattinson plays Batman as a force of nature, pure vengeance with little restraint. He has humanity, and he cares deeply for the innocent, but he's consumed by his mission. He neglects taking care of his family's business interests, he has no social life. Even his relationship with Alfred is a tense one. This lack of balance between Bruce Wayne and Batman creates serious ramifications that eventually come to a head. Paul Dano's Riddler is a significant departure from the comic. His methodology and appearance are modeled after the Zodiac Killer. Your mileage may vary, depending on how you feel about fidelity to the source material. On its own merits, he gives a creepy performance, and I love that he's a formidable foe for Batman and leaves lasting consequences, not just for the Dark Knight, but for the whole city. I will say, though, that I wish there had been something to connect the character more to the comic. Jeffrey Wright fits in nicely as Lieutenant Gordon. I'm glad they jumped right into them already being allies, and I enjoyed that interplay between him and Batman. He's treated as a competent ally rather than simply a device for exposition, which I've always preferred. Zoe Kravitz portrays Catwoman much like the character was written in Batman Year One. She's jaded, with few friends, mostly motivated by revenge and self-interest, but there's still that spark of goodness there. I do have one major criticism, but I'll hold off on that until a little later. The plot of the Batman emphasizes the detective angle of the character. Much has been made about this leading up to the release, and while I do find it refreshing to explore this facet of Batman, I think people are having selective amnesia. It's not like there was never any detective work taking place in the previous movies. Even as far back as the Burton era, you've got him figuring out the compounds for Joker Smilek's toxin, or reading old articles about the Penguin circus gang. It's all side stuff, but I never felt like I was being robbed of anything. Batman's a superhero, so I'd rather see him punch a bad guy instead of pondering over a piece of evidence. Now, thankfully, this movie gives us a healthy dose of action. There's quite a bit of brawling, there's a chase in the Batmobile, which looks awesome, by the way, and the climax where he faces off against a bunch of terrorists, it's all fantastic. The devastation is on the level of The Dark Knight Rises. It's all shot and edited well. It's not blurry or disorienting. You can actually see what is going on, and in a memorable instance, you have one long continuous take which shows the level of precision in the choreography. The story is not without its flaws, though. For starters, it runs way too freaking long, nearly 3 hours. I would attribute most of this to the shots where they're trying to establish the mood. It might be Batman walking through the crime scene, etc. From a creative standpoint, I certainly understand the choice, but I think economy of storytelling should be given higher priority. Another thing I took issue with is how utterly dour the movie is. I don't hate that it's dark. That's fine. That's great. But it needed some levity to offset the darkness. The best Batman stories have always found that balance. Lastly, I found some of the plot twists to be bad decisions or unnecessary. Giving Thomas Wayne ties to the Mafia, however minor, seems like a total betrayal to that character. And having Selina Kyle be the illegitimate daughter of the mobster Falcone felt contrived. Having her mother murdered by the mob was sufficient motivation for her wanting revenge. They didn't need to throw a family connection in there. And yes, I'm aware that it's present in The Long Halloween. It still feels shoehorned. The score is composed by Michael Giacchino, or Giacchino, or, I honestly don't know how it's pronounced. My apologies. But I've enjoyed his scores for Star Trek, The Incredibles, and even the MCU Spider-Man films. But I'll be honest, I don't think much of this film's music. Other than the dum 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 dum, that whole thing that repeatedly shows up in the film and was in the trailers and everything. This score is not particularly memorable and definitely not very melodic. I mean, it's certainly better than the glorified Muzak that Hans Zimmer puts out, but I think Danny Elfman and Shirley Walker brought far better contributions to Batman. Heck, even Ellie Goldenthal wrote more distinctive pieces. But that leaves us with the big question. Where does this rank in the Batman film franchise? The performances are all solid, the action is top-notch, it looks and feels like a comic book, yet it has some degree of realism in the story and characters. In many ways, I'd argue that it takes some of the best aspects from the Burton and Nolan eras, yet it's still very much its own thing. I think I'd probably rank it as the fourth best in the franchise, maybe third. If you're wanting to know how I've ranked the other films, you can check out my other video. And when you're done with that, take a look at my reviews for some of the animated features. But make sure you go and see the Batman. Just leave the kids at home and be prepared for a long movie.